All right, good morning, folks. Government Operations, Military Affairs, House of Representatives. It is roughly after 9 a.m. on March 12th, and we are going to spend our entire morning discussing this case. So we do have a new draft, we do have a new summary, and we are joined by the Secretary of State's team, Deputy Secretary of State Hibbert, and Washington Director Sean Jin. Barring anyone not wanting to do it this way, I was gonna invite him up to the table.
He's wound up today.
So great. I've been going since 5:30.
I tried taking out talking about so the first time I slept for 3 hours. Wide awake, I'm like, well, that didn't work.
I know. Caitlin knocks me out.
All right.
Do you want to check?
Oh, no, it's just great. Oh, yeah.
It's gonna make me look taller than I already am.
There's a hand. Yeah.
You know what? I'm just gonna own the fact, I'm a tall woman. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State, and I have with me.
Sean Sheehan, Elections Director at Secretary of State's Office.
Thank you so much for having us in. We do have filed testimony in response to draft 1.6. It was sent to your awesome Autumn Committee assistant this morning, so sorry for its late addition. If it's okay with you, we'll just walk through section by section and then just tell you where we are. Section 1 is the report on RCV, ranked choice voting. This committee did hear testimony about RCV before the break. Our office supports RCV quite a bit. We think that the 2028 presidential primary is the right place to do it. We supported moving a language this session. We understand that might not be possible for a variety of factors. And we would welcome writing this report. We think the due date is appropriate, January of 2020. Well, actually, Sean, I think we were wrong here. I think we want it to be 2025.
January 2025 is 2 months.
Oh, we want it to be
It was just a
January.
typo.
We want it to be January of 26, not 25, because January of 25
We don't want to argue.
was 2 months ago. So if we could move it to January of 26, that would be good. We'll work with all of the stakeholders on writing this report. But we look forward to bringing a proposal to this committee, maybe next session or in the next item.
Gotcha. Note in margin.
Thank you.
The next several sections, sections 2 through 7, deal broadly with fusion candidates, related issues, the multiple bites, the apple, and so forth. All of these sections, the Secretary of State's office sees as a policy decision for the legislature. Our office is equipped to implement any of these changes, and we're also equipped to maintain current practice. We understand kind of the background, more than happy to discuss fusion candidates, its history with the committee or questions on that side. We know it was common in the 19th century. We know most states currently don't allow it. There's some like New York and Connecticut that do allow fusion candidates that don't have the multiple major parties, but have each candidate's name listed next to the party as a separate line, and other states do it the way Vermont currently does it. So I think the way this bill would prohibit candidates from displaying multiple party affiliations on the ballot, it would add Vermont to the ranks of the majority of states that disallow the practice. But again, the Secretary of State's office sees this as a policy decision. Don't have a position.
Understood. So, my question for you with this, it's more binary question to this. How many states currently have a structure like Vermont or same as Vermont? Do you know? I know it's some. Do we know how many that is?
It's a handful. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's up in maybe the dozen and a half range that have some sort of, fusion candidates for multiple, but whether it be the New York, Connecticut version or the Vermont versions, maybe in the 30-ish states that don't.
Like a
don't allow
variation thereof.
Yeah, there's a report. I think the Brennan Center's done a report on the number of states that have it. I'd be happy to send that link over to the committee.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting read if you don't mind. Yeah, Representative Hoover, Berlin.
Thank you. So fusion candidates in that pool that you're just talking about is sort of universal. Do you have to sit for a primary and be nominated by that group to be considered a fusion candidate, or can you fill your name in on the top of a petition and that's how you get to be a fusion?
Yeah, I don't know each state specifically. I do know that Vermont is rare in having three major parties and the primaries in the way we do. There's other states that have just, one primary, which, either they call the jungle primary or the open
Yeah.
primaries where they're all in. There's, a lot of states obviously just have two major parties, and then minor parties would have a nominating caucus. So, as far as the any rules in other states, as far as the one bite of the apple side, whether other states would allow somebody to run in one of the major party primaries and then get on the ballot as on a minor party nomination. I haven't seen research on that stuff.
Well, I asked that because a lot of people talk about, and we have testimony about being a progressive Democrat and filling it out here, familiar with this one. Do I need to submit this for evidence? But that's two major parties on one form, right? So that should not actually happen.
Well, when we get that form, we make someone choose,
Yeah.
Democrat or progressive. You
For the
can't not-
primary.
For the primary,
Yeah.
not put both on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Form.
Yeah, that is one of the things.
On the ballot, we do have fusion,
Yeah.
but on the petition has to only have one party because we have three major parties and the voter needs to know which party the candidate is running for in the primary.
So,
Yep, and I just want to clarify, we do have three major parties in the state of Vermont, because some of the other states that you mentioned where fusion candidates still exist, like New York, there are a lot more minor parties. But I just want to say in Vermont, just clarify for the 150th time, we do have three major parties, right? And could you say what they are?
Yes,
Okay.
Republican, Democrat, and
Thank you, okay. Just wanted to lay it out there.
any other questions?
How many minor parties do we have?
We have two official minor parties.
Liberty Union
The Libertarian and the Green Mountain Pizza Justice.
and.
Liberty Union has me.
moving on to section 8.
Please.
This is universal vote by mail for the August primary. I will say, maybe not for the 150th time, but for maybe the 10th time, our office really supports universal vote by mail. We see a lot of voter turnout with universal vote by mail. We've had our highest participation ever in our general elections, over 70% in each of the ones that we have conducted by universal vote by mail. And that just tells everybody that universal vote by mail gives voters the opportunity to get really engaged. We also have heard from clerks and the public that it is confusing that we vote in 3 different ways in 3 different elections. And we support the goal of bringing more consistency across the way we do elections in the state. Expanding universal vote by mail would obviously help with providing consistency, because the way that we conduct an election in August would be the same way that we conduct an election in November. So voters could expect they would receive a ballot mailed to them in both of those elections, and that they would need to bring the ballot to the voting location if they were not going to return the ballot by mail. And there are major financial and logistical considerations here. We would ask that this committee not move forward on this section of the bill without a fiscal note. There is substantial cost to mailing ballots. We think the cost is justified and appropriate. But it needs to be understood for the August primary. We also need to understand some logistical, considerations. We may need to move some deadlines if this were to change, for instance. So, with that in mind, you know, in terms of financial and logistical considerations, some of them are big policy decisions. Back to, we have 3 major parties in this state. And so because we have 3 major parties, we would have to mail out 3 primary ballots. That is extremely expensive, particularly when one of those parties only returned somewhere close to 400 ballots in total. Out of 450 ballots, 450,000 voters, we received, 400 ballots in the progressive primary. So we need to assess the costs. We need to think about how, if we're going to move forward with universal vote by mail, how we would change our process, or how we would recommend that you change our process. There's a couple of things that we put into our testimony. There's some changes that we have come to off the cuff, but we would need to study it more. First would be offering party registration. So we could mail people the ballot that they've registered for. This is the approach that's taken in a lot of universal vote by mail states who have universal vote by mail for primaries, Oregon being one of them. So if you're registered for a party, you only get that party's ballot. So we're not mailing 3. And then if you don't consider yourself part of a political party, which a lot of Vermonters do not, then you would not automatically get a universal vote by mail. You would have to request it via your clerk or go to the polling location on primary day. We could raise the standard for what constitutes a major party. That obviously would be relatively political. But right now, if only less than 500 people are going to vote in the state primary, should it be considered a major party is a question. And then there could also be a primary, like Director Sheehan was just referring to, a nonpartisan primary or top 2 primary, where all the candidates are listed on the same ballot. So those are big policy decisions, huge policy decisions that will have a financial impact. And because of that, because of the complexity of the 3 parties and the 3 ballots for the August primary at this time, while we strongly support universal vote by mail, we do not support moving this section forward this year.
Understood. I Representative Morgan, and then
Yeah, thank you. Just obviously, I heard you allude to a fiscal note against it, but would you dare step out on the limb and say what you might roughly think that expense would be? Just to highlight, because I talked with my town clerk actually just this morning. I talked to her over the break and then again this morning. She's concerned about cost. She's also concerned about the logistical nightmare of the whole mishmash of, how you get the 3 different ballots. Yeah, so.
Well, so I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe our universal vote by mail for November is about $1.5 million. And there's a lot of logistics involved with that. A lot of coordination with our mail house, with the United States Post Office. It has gone amazingly successfully.
Yeah.
All things considered, but it is a lot of logistics, and we still need to obviously work with our printer and shipper of ballots who ships them to the town clerk. So that wouldn't be changed, but the logistics with the United States Post Office is a big
Sure.
one. And the other piece is we would have to really think about ballot design. We have people who help us with ballot design, but if we were to keep 3 primaries, 3 ballots for this primary, the instructions would have to be incredibly clear. Right now, as it is, even when you show up to your polling location, it is confusing to voters what's happening.
Yeah.
And it could be confusing to receive all 3. You'd have to return 2. And otherwise your vote would be defective, and then the voter would have to cure it, and that adds a lot of work to town clerks, to receive a defective ballot, to reach out to the voter, to have the voter cure it, is work.
Yeah, she said, following that, she just basically said that, you know, she thought it would be a nightmare, for a logistical nightmare for her, you all, and she said, you know, it's not a great analogy. She said, look what you went through with Bennington One. She goes, are we looking to have other problems with this? And I don't know, she said, but she just threw that out. And I think there's some validity to it, but I'm glad to hear that you're supporting not moving forward, because I would agree that I think the timing's not right, and it's an expense I don't know that we ought to be bearing at this point, but that's just my 2 cents, but thank you.
And it does currently happen. I mean, to be clear, we do send out the UOCAVA, the overseas and the
Yeah, oh, yeah.
They send, and
Sure.
people who
Yeah,
request ballots,
Of course.
you know, get those multiple, but because we
Yeah.
are the multiple envelopes being sent in and the 3 ballots and the instructions that Deputy Secretary.
But it's a limited
referred
audience
to, it's a limited
compared to
audience.
this.
They tend to be a, you know, self-selected audience of people who tend to be more
Active.
active and more likely to understand those instructions.
Understood.
Even with them, you know, I think clerks can speak,
Sure.
you know, to some of the errors and the cures that need to happen, but I think we should anticipate it would be a higher rate of needing to be cured in this stage. And to the dollar figure that Deputy Secretary had referred to as well was accurate for the general election. We'll just point out, we expect this number would be north of that because it would be a
Sure.
more complex mailing with
Absolutely.
more
That's
paper,
it.
more envelopes.
Exactly my point. Yeah, thank you very much.
That being said, we do think that this would increase participation in the
Oh, sure.
August primary. And I think that is a goal of the Secretary of State's office and hopefully of all of us, that there are more Vermonters voting in the primaries. I think that leads to, without offense to the people at the table, better and more vetted candidates for the general election. I think that's good for everybody. So we want this conversation to continue, just with more analysis.
Yes. Representative Hago, I think I had you first on the list.
Yeah, I think, I didn't realize the complexity of this because we started talking about it last biennium and sort of dropped it. And now it sounds like maybe we don't have the time to delve into this week as well, because it's so complex. And, I don't want to end this session by saying, oh, we're just not going to deal with it. So, you know, we need to think about this, and much as I hate to say the word, study it.
Well, if I may, we did a report on this that we filed in 2023. And I think that there's a lot that's still relevant in that report that we filed just 2 years ago. But what I would like to think about is maybe something similar to what we did. And I would need to talk about it with the team and vet the language a little bit, but maybe it's possible to come with a proposal to this committee, not in 2026, but in 2027. Because that's when we should move it. We shouldn't move it in 2026 because it's an election year, but we could move it in 2027. And at that point, building on the report that we've already written, hopefully, I would still be interested in having a fiscal note move this session, because that would be really helpful tool for our office.
Mhm.
So if there's a way that we could get a fiscal note on this topic this session, that would get us a lot further. And maybe we could have a proposal put together for 2027.
I believe as long as the bill is moving, we can request a fiscal note. And I like the idea of using the wording of proposal rather than study. So that,
Me too,
that
because it
means
feels like it's gonna
more.
be acted on.
Yes.
It's a simple word change, but it feels better, right?
Yeah, so thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, all right, cool. I feel like we're framing that out into a more clear sort of focus, but Representative Bissell, I saw you.
Yes, in the 2020 and the 2024 general elections, have we pulled the clerks to find out how many affidavits had to be filled out because voters did not bring back their mail-in ballots, or threw them away, or burned them to start their wood fire with, because I got that excuse. Just in the 2024, we had over 300 endorse it,
Just in your town.
just in my town. So I'd be curious as to, and then what is the cost what does it cost us to mail out those ballots, the 2024 ballots?
It was,
And the postage and how much?
it was approximately $1.5 million. And I
A
don't know.
million and a half dollars for 450,000 voters. It's a lot of money.
It also is a significant boost in participation year after year. And that has been, very successful. We can see across party lines.
Yeah, and that's the total cost of the mailing. Somewhat fewer ballots are printed for the actual locations there, so the net additional cost would be somewhat less of that, but certainly it does cost more than just voting at the polls. But
And I'd also be
Deputy Secretary
curious as to how many people brought their ballots to the polls and how many of those extra envelopes were in the ballots that town clerks collected and with prepaid postage on them that are sitting in their offices now.
I don't know that we have that, that statistic. But it is pretty clear that 60% of Vermonters voted by universal vote by mail and did not go to the polls. So Vermonters really like universal vote by mail and returning their ballot by mail. It has been widely embraced by Vermonters.
So I just want to say something like anecdotally to this in the primary that I noticed within not just my district, but outside of the conversation with people where they were like, what do you mean we're voting? Nobody mailed me a ballot. So from COVID, out of COVID, and these practices that we've utilized in those moments in time, that one sort of break in the routine, they were just, their mind was in a place to just see it show up.
Yeah, I think
And
voters really
it
expect
caught them off guard. Like they were like, wait, what? What? Oh, I gotta go in straight up without this in my hand, like, or mail it in. So that, I just wanted to say that part out loud. That was, that feedback that I got from people in the moment and after was one of the reasons I wanted to like see what we could do within this conversation.
And I think voters expect it and voters like it because they're able to look at their ballot for longer. They're able to think about their candidates for longer. We heard a lot of positive feedback on the voter guide in connection with having a universal vote by mail. People were looking at their ballots and then looking at the candidates online, looking at people's web pages. Those two things in conjunction make for more educated voters and voters who are able to deliberate and their choices in a better way and think about the candidate who meets their values, their goals the best. So again, you know, we really support universal vote by mail. We think the cost is worth it. We understand there's a cost. We probably will say the cost is worth it for the August primary too. But we just need to understand the cost and make sure that everyone is clear on the cost, particularly with the state of election funding at this moment. So
Yes, that is a variable in this conversation.
it is.
Representative Hooper Randolph, I saw him.
What is the additional cost of including the voter guide?
We have estimated that the voter guide is 1.5 to mail to people's homes. To do it digitally like we did it last year, there was minimal, which is probably what we will continue to do. But we really think having a printed voter guide mailed to each household, not to each voter, but to each household for the general election provides voters better access to information because a lot of people we have a significant digital divide in the state. And we think that people are receiving the paper ballot in November, they should receive a paper voter guide and be able to sit with those two things together. Or like I did in my household, I sat down with my 12-year-old and went through all the candidates and showed him every candidate's webpage, even if I knew I was not going to vote for them, and explained why. Because I'm really committed to him understanding that he has a civic responsibility. Voting is just one of many that he has responsibility to. But you know, I think a lot of Vermonters are using that as a tool for themselves, but also for their families.
Representative Hooper, Burlington.
To clarify something Cindy asked, we only pay for the ballots to get mailed back in. The envelopes are pre-signed, but if the post office does the envelope, they don't charge them.
That is correct. And to be clear, 1.5, just to really emphasize what Director Sheehan said, 1.5 that cost doesn't go away if we get rid of universal vote by mail. That's just for the mailing. The cost of the mailing, we still would have the cost of the printing. So, and that would be almost close to $750, I think. The printing of all of the ballots for all of the voters. So, you know, the mailing is the additional cost that gets us up to 1.5, but the cost of printing is stable, whether we do universal vote by mail or not.
The digital divide would prevent us from going on to the My Voter page and saying, send me this ballot, send me that ballot.
The digital divide, we have thought about that as well, and we'd like to analyze that. I mean, that would be something that we could come back in a proposal with. We could really encourage voters to do that. Right now, a voter can ask for an absentee ballot for an entire year. I think there's work that our office can do in conjunction with clerks to communicate to voters that they have that option. Probably in January and February, we should have that initiative, because that would help with town meeting, state primary and general. But that has to be renewed every year right now. And yeah, the digital divide does cause issues with people doing that. And I think a lot of people don't understand the full functionality and tools that they have on My Voter page.
How many of us?
How many of us have My Voter page?
All of
Every single one of us. We're all, well, hopefully we're all voters.
Turn it over, how many of us are aware of it?
I have no idea how many of us are aware. We might have a statistic on how many of us use it, but my guess is, it's low.
All right. Let's keep chugging.
All right, so the next section, section 9, reports. Section calls for office to do another report on electronic ballot return in November 2025. On this, we're happy to do this report. We would suggest that the due date for this report be amended back a year to November of 2026. The rationale, as Deputy Secretary Hebert referenced before, is that we typically don't move election policy in an election year, as we noted in our written testimony as well, this is an area that's somewhat fluid on many fronts. I'm happy to speak to at least three considerations, developments that are happening. Number one is there's been reports from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, that identify areas that need to be tightened up before we would be able, Secretary of State's office would be able to have full confidence in the security of electronic ballot return. And given the federal posture in the last month that security of elections are no longer critical infrastructure, it seems unlikely that standard for security will be developed in the next couple of years. So we certainly would continue monitoring what other states are doing, including assessing how many adopt or discontinue electronic ballot return. We'd be happy to report back in a couple of years if there's changes in the landscape or around security, best practice and guidance. That would be the first consideration to flag. The second is we want to be sure that the Agency of Digital Services would be involved in assessing security provisions and Vermont's level of preparation in this last election cycle, with all the security threats we were receiving from overseas and domestically, working closely with our federal partners at CISA and the FBI, Agency of Digital Services, and Vermont State Police were right next to us the whole way. And certainly ADS has a level of expertise on the cyber side that we would want involved. And thirdly, just back to where I started, really, that changes to major policy really should happen in the odd numbered year to give Secretary of State's office and clerks ample time to prepare for the change. So that's why we see if the report came out right before that 2027 legislative session, that would allow all of you to have the most up-to-date information to then act on.
I find all of that to be logical. Representative Mango?
Thank you. I'm gonna go back in time a little bit to when we first started talking about this. I've gotten a number of emails from folks inquiring about this electronic balloting, and I really feel like there's a big misconception. People are looking at this and thinking that we're gonna be voting on our tablets and, it's gonna be over the internet, open to any type of, breach. So can you please explain to people who are listening what this electronic balloting that you will be studying will consist of?
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And one thing I should have backed up as well, that we, in the proposal, in the language that actually we'll speak about later as well, in the previous version of the bill, talked about both expanding electronic ballot delivery and then introducing electronic ballot return. And that's important, I think, to define those two. Electronic ballot delivery currently is an option that happens for military and overseas voters, people who are ill, have a disability. They can get their ballot delivered to them in electronic format, which they would get that ballot, they print out that ballot, and then they mail it in. They still have to mail the physical ballot. It goes back to their town, the town clerks. The town clerk's office gets that ballot if they need to. They have two members of the Board of Civil Authority take the ballot if it wouldn't be readable by the machine in a town, and they would copy it over, again, in the presence of two people to ensure that there's no fraud on that side. That currently happens. We're strongly supportive of electronic ballot delivery, as we'll speak about. We're in favor of expanding it to Safe at Home members in the address confidentiality program. We'll speak to that. It really allows military overseas voters, knowing the problems that we've had with mail delivery nationally in the country in recent years. That 45 days seems like a lot of time, but if mail takes a week or two to get somewhere, then filled out, week or two back, you're right up against that line. So that's why we feel that electronic ballot delivery is important. Electronic ballot return.
I'm sorry, before you go on to return, could I ask one question, please? Who sends out that electronic ballot? Is it the town clerks or is it your office?
It comes out of the election management system, which is run by our office. It's a request through the town, much as we'll talk about with the statewide checklist, it's the infrastructure, the electronic management system that we maintain. And the individual checklists and local elections are run by the local clerks and the Board of Civil Authority. So if a local clerk
Requested.
requests it, they trigger it from our system. Once they trigger it, it gets sent out immediately.
Thank you. And the reason I'm asking all of these rudimentary questions is because we did discuss all of this last biennium, but a lot of folks are new and people listening online still don't quite understand it. So thank you. Please go on to the,
Absolutely.
to the return of the ballot.
So the electronic ballot return, the way, again, this would be a piece for how it's implemented, states that do use it, but it's a user portal. I understand the way it typically works in most states would be they would have that ballot, would scan it, save it as and upload it the same way you would upload a document when you file your taxes or apply for the Department of Motor Vehicles or benefits through Agency of Human Services. So it'd be a secure portal where the ballot would be uploaded and then would go into the election management system. The clerks would have access to it from there.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that clears up confusion for folks and helps us to explain to constituents who are writing to us.
Representative Stone?
Question kind of / point of information was that the Department of Defense does have a study that was released in 2023 about this issue, about end-to-end electronic voting. So that's on the Department of Defense website, and I'm happy to share with the committee. So this is not like Facebook voting, just throwing it out there.
And the Department of Defense, rightly so, strongly supports it, and for good reason, because quite a few members are in places where mail takes much longer than a week to get and to return.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Representative?
Yeah, I'll share with
Just,
everyone.
just so I'm crystal clear then, so you're recommending only at this point a report on this component of it, not a move forward, not a move out, let's go.
Yeah, that's what it's that's what you have.
Yeah, that's what I mean, you're
in the bill
supporting
right
that. Yeah,
now.
you're not
We're supportive of
that
the way you
statement.
have elections
Yeah, I just wanted to be
in the bill,
crystal
and
clear on
we're
it.
just
Okay.
encouraging it that
Yeah.
be bumped the year to be
Yes.
in line.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
That being said, if our office feels that the technology exists, that and that it would be implementable for us, I think after we study it, we likely might support this. We
Right.
just, we have
Understood.
some open questions that need to be
Yes.
resolved.
Yep.
And we really want to look into this.
I think it's good. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Sections 10, 11, and 12 are related to candidate demographic information. We support this proposal to move this year. I actually want to say thank you to Representative Pinsino. She brought up some really good questions when we first talked through the language and about having this information on consent. And so we are asking to amend these sections to strike the changes to section 10 and 11 and just put these changes into section 12 so that candidates do not put this information on their consent forms, which are public and frequently published to the web, because that would cause everyone to have to redact them. But instead, that the most significant change is that we would have town clerks, if it's okay, if people are following along, our recommended language to 17 VSA 26,665 would be to take that and break it into 3 sections. Section A would require the town clerk to file with the Secretary of State a list of candidates, street addresses, and email addresses. We still really want that change because that's how we communicate most frequently. And the end date of the term of office for each selected member, city councilor, village trustee, and mayor elected. The town clerk shall notify the Secretary of State of any changes in that list as filed. That would be section A of that law. Section B candidates can voluntarily provide information about the candidate's gender, age, race, or ethnicity in the format provided by the Secretary of State. A candidate who does not provide information pertaining to gender, age, race, or ethnicity may still appear on the ballot if all other requirements are met. So that would be how we would collect that data. And just for this committee's information, we are hoping that once every candidate is required to file within our campaign finance system, that is where we would collect that data. So it would be in a place where we can aggregate it, where we can redact it if asked for publicly, but it would not be on the consent form. And that just makes a lot of sense to not have that ongoing public records issue. And that brings us to section C, which is currently in the proposed language of section 12, which is data collected pursuant to this subsection is exempt from public inspection and copying under the Public Records Act and shall be kept confidential, except that the Secretary of State may publish information pertaining to candidates' gender, age, race, or ethnicity in aggregate form. And this is just thanks to Representative Pinsino. This is a suggestion that we heard, and I think this is a more elegant way to do it and gives us some flexibility on how we collect it.
Understood.
Thank you.
Questions from the table on this? Thanks. Representative.
I'm just curious how you feel about the data security of the Secretary of State website to handle that kind of info, like.
Yes. So this would not be collected on our website. It would be collected within our campaign finance system, which is hosted in the cloud and has a lot of security protections around it. It is immensely protected. It's protected through penetration testing, through industry standards, and also it's behind a WAF, which protects us from all sorts of attacks. So we feel confident that this is a place where that information could be collected. And in fact, we have other systems that collect even more sensitive data than that with those same security parameters. This is not a web form, and it would not be an Excel spreadsheet on our website. It would be very intensely protected.
All right. Now, glad to see that getting tightened up and like, I'm just on first read, second read and third read right now, it's making sense. Thank you.
Check.
Oh, please, yeah, proceed.
Sections 13, 14, and 15 pertain to write-in candidates. The previous version of the bill had a fourth section, which I think we'll speak to later. We think might have inadvertently fallen off related to the presidential primary piece, which also dealt with the write-in. So we'll speak to that. But overall, we're in support of all four of these sections changes. What we'll do is create a registration process for write-in candidates who would consent to serving if elected. This change will make the election results process especially more efficient for clerks and local officials. It'll make the process more efficient, more consistent than it's currently done, and kind of a lot of the confusion with write-in candidates who are fictitious or not real or no intention to serving, and error-free, while still allowing access to late aspiring candidates. So we support VSA, the changes in section 13 and 14 to 17 VSA 2370 and 2472 as written. With section 15, 17 VSA 2587, we just had a slight suggested edit in the written testimony we have, which addresses how write-in votes will be counted and reported. This carries over the language from the bill from 2 years ago. In that language, it spoke about in 2587 E3, the candidates who aren't registered would be tallied as quote unquote write-ins. We think because they're actually, some are being tallied, that would be clear if that was quote unquote other write-ins. And then under current law, if you're fictitious or not alive, you're counted as a blank vote. You're not counted in write-ins. And so that subsequent bullet under there, 2587 E3, we just had suggestion of a slight tweak to align with that same language, that those candidates who were not registered won't be listed individually, but will be listed in the aggregate as quote unquote other write-ins. We feel that will both be clear, still easy for clerks and VCA to administer, and also add a level of transparency and consistency. So people who are writing in other names can still see when they go to the election results that there were 250 other write-ins. They're just being listed in the aggregate because those candidates weren't registered.
So there would be 3 categories in this section. There would be write-ins, those who had registered. There'd be other write-ins, and then there still would be blank votes for the fictitious or.
The blank, well, no, the blank.
Blank would just
votes
be
only
blank, blank would
blanks,
be
yeah.
blank.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody who's fictitious in there, that part is struck,
So
so
there's no longer subtracting from write-ins and
Yes.
adding it to the blanks. It's
Exactly.
just a blank.
that's
Perfect.
the way it works right now. You have the election night reporting, you just have the total number of write-ins, which includes fictitious, includes
Yes.
everything else. Now, when you're going through, you're not pulling out all those separate ones. You're pulling out, okay, Representative Hooper is a named candidate. He also got 5 people wrote him in. Don't know why they wrote him in the circle, but yes, we're gonna add those 5 votes to him. Jane
Yes,
Smith over here, she's not on the ballot, but she did give her consent to candidacy form turned in. So we're counting her votes. She got 12 write-in votes. And then the other
Whatever.
278 people, whether they wrote in a
Mickey
slogan, I'm not,
And
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse would get.
Mickey Mouse, Jesus,
Yeah.
God bless America,
We
anything
talked
else.
about Hulk Hogan a while
Yeah.
ago. Stage names versus real names.
Yeah. So those 278 variants, the clerks, VCA no longer have to parse those out.
perfect. Thank you.
Say other write-ins.
Think that's good?
All right.
So sections 16, 17, 18, and 19, we are very grateful that this is part of this bill. We are asking for a minor amendments to these sections, and I want to forecast for this committee that we may ask for amendments on the Senate side. We received some feedback from the Attorney General's office yesterday on these sections, and Sean and I were not able to absorb it fully in the timeframe that we had, and we need to meet with them again to understand it. So at this moment, I can tell you it looks like it's fairly minor edits, but we just need to really understand where they're coming from. And I just like to let people know if we're going to be advocating for more change on the other side, and we know that now, to let you guys know while we're in front of you testifying. So we do not have any changes to 16 or 17. Particularly, we really appreciate 16, which requires all candidates to register. That's very important to our office. We do recommend modifications to section 18, which is a public question campaign, really defining that it means a political campaign, and the addition would be specifically an effort to influence an election that conducts its activities entirely independent of candidates, does not give contributions to candidates, political committees, or political parties, and does not make any related campaign expenditures as defined in section 2944B of this title. So specifically an effort to influence an election, and campaign are all clarifications, and that definition is important. And is not closely related to a political party or a political committee that makes contributions to campaigns or makes related expenditures. It is important to add this last sentence, and your House clerk helped us with this language, which is phenomenal that she was watching and bringing her expertise to the floor. And it includes campaigns making independent expenditures as defined by federal law, 52 USC section 3101. So we believe that this will help clarify who we're talking about and require broader categories of individuals to file with our office, which we think is appropriate. And then we are asking for a modification to section 19, which takes it's adding a section that's not currently in the bill related to mass media. We had missed this again, with gratitude to your House clerk. We had found a place where independent expenditure only political committee, which is the term that we would like to have removed, was still in the statute. So we would ask to replace that with a public question campaign in 2 places of that section.
Any questions from the table on that?
I'm still trying to digest this. And I don't know if you can say it in any plainer language.
Did my best. Do you want me to try and do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you said it.
Sorry.
So,
The leading question.
what we are trying to do is there are on whole, with the modifications here, is to make it clear that if there is one business or one individual who is spending or receiving considerable money to try and influence a campaign without making a contribution to a candidate, right? If you make a contribution to a candidate, then it's very public because the candidate has to disclose it.
Right.
What we're trying to do is if you are trying to influence a campaign, a proposal within a town, a school budget, a constitutional question, some of those big questions that come to Vermonters that are not related to a specific candidate. So if it's related to a specific candidate, voters can know. I'm trying to think of.
For instance, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
Maybe like they want to bring cannabis before cannabis, they wanted to bring cannabis, so they would do a public question, non-binding question. And so they could raise money, but they weren't. And she was for cannabis. She was running her campaign. They wouldn't be making donations to her. They would just be taking the money in and spending it in their own advertising.
To like
To their own
promote
campaign.
and
To
advocate
promote-
for the ballot initiative,
For
where
the
the
ballot.
candidate was openly supportive of, but there was no direct
Direct
link
relation
between the
to,
two. It
right.
was just this.
But it's just a public question. If they're spending,
Yeah.
they're getting donations for that, and then they're putting it out there in their campaign.
I guess in my naivete, because my district is so quiet and small and everything. We don't have any influential things like that
There was one a
people
couple of
do,
years
so I
ago.
don't understand this
Yeah.
at all.
My guess is that it will be coming to you. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
And I think, our two constitutional amendments that occurred in 2020, there was quite a few of these. And,
Yeah.
so, I mean, sorry, 2022, they were in 2020.
So going back to your explanation then, could you finish that or was that finished?
Well, so what we are trying to do is clarify that, what these campaigns are. Independent expenditure campaign meant that it was not connected to a candidate. And this is, we are, changing the terminology to public question because it's clearer. And broadening who is included. So a lot of places in the law, it's saying two or more. But what we have heard is that there's frequently one big business arguing against a public campaign, or one individual spending considerable money in favor or in disfavor of a public question. So what these sections in total are doing are saying, we would like this to apply to one or more individuals or businesses, corporations, and that those expenditures would be transparent to the voter. So they would know that this public question, Gun Rights Vermont is opposing, or Cannabis for Vermont is supporting, or
So that individual or single organization would have to file a
Yes.
campaign finance.
yes.
Exposure.
This is an effort
Yeah,
to increase
understandable.
transparency.
Yeah.
To make sure that people understand
Yeah.
the funds that are being raised and spent on public questions that are in our elections.
So close the loophole of who doesn't have to file the disclosure, one, and two, make sure that everybody's filing a consistent disclosure right now of both where the funds came from and how the funds were expended and whose name is attached to that committee. So, and again, it could be self-funded, so just like for candidates or anything else, but you would say where the funds came from, where the funds.
And that's the $1,000 limit, is there, correct?
Yes, it is $1,000.
And it could pertain to things like, trying to influence a development review board for certain, projects that they might have, or.
It would be specific to an election. So if the development review board had something that came in front of a
So it
community,
would
yes.
only be in an elected or an elected.
For an election,
Yeah, for public questions.
Right, okay, and it could be a non-binding
yes.
question.
On town meeting day would be the place where that would most frequently occur.
Representative Hoover.
So that last comment, we don't have binding ballot initiatives in the sense that other states do.
Not in the same, I mean, for towns, yes. For statewide, no. We're outside of the constitutional amendment process.
Like a non-binding question might be that somebody in Newtown might come up with a question for the voters that they don't want any smoking within the town lines. It's non-binding because the select board might not act on it. Like it's not they could say, well, no, that's not binding. It's not constitutional, right? So they wouldn't act on it, but they could still force the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand the intent behind it and it's very noble, but I'm not sure I'd love it for everything, like a non-binding question. I'm grappling with that. So,
We'll marinate on that. We're gonna have plenty more time to talk about these buckets, so we'll flag that for more conversation.
If I can just respond a little
please.
bit.
Yeah.
It is easier to communicate when the laws are the same for everybody in every situation. So I would just ask that you think about that, because when there's added nuance, it's harder to explain and harder for people to understand. So our goal was to have one standard for everybody, but I hear your concern and I certainly, by all means, please ruminate on it, ask questions of us if you want. And you can obviously make a different policy determination, but our goal is to make this as simple as possible to explain and as easy for people to know how to become in compliance, because the reality is this section, candidates sometimes probably could have more help with campaign finance. They understand what their obligations are. Big PACs understand. If I am opposing the school budget and I want to spend $1,000 of my money to make signs, and I have never participated, or I'm supporting the school budget in either direction, right? And I've never really participated in the public sphere before, and I'm going to spend $12,000 to make signs and pamphlets and of my own money. I would fall into this category, and I should. The community should know that Lauren Hibbert is supporting the budget, and I'm the one who put forward all those signs. But I wouldn't take me out of it. I would know, but I'm just somebody, not Deputy Secretary of State, who should know these laws backwards and forwards. I would not know. And so we need to help people understand and come into compliance. We really don't want to be a punitive agency and do gotcha moments. We want people to understand what's required of them, and we want voters to know who put the signs all around town in support of the school budget.
Okay, great. So how would you go about letting the average citizen understand what their
Yeah.
responsibility is? I mean, most people aren't gonna spend $12,000, but say they spend $1,001
Yeah.
on a particular issue. How would they know?
Well, I think it would be it will be a difficult thing to communicate. I'm not going to tell you it won't be, but it's us talking publicly about this change. It's working with town clerks so they understand the change, so that if they receive the petitions in favor or oppose, they can help the petitioner understand. You know, these questions come the questions on the ballot, not the school budget, but those come to the clerk. They can help with our education. We can provide materials to be in town clerk's offices. We obviously would help with the parties understand this. So hopefully we would create more of a culture of compliance and sort of an expectation. But would this change overnight? I can't tell you it would, because it's a public education campaign, really, and people will not understand. And then they'll call our office and say, you know, I messed up, I need to file, and we would help them file. I mean, that happens today.
Yeah.
Most of the time when that happens, we just get someone appropriately registered, and, you know, obviously someone can make a complaint to the Attorney General's office, but we want really, our office's perspective is, let's educate people, let's get them into compliance and help them be more transparent about their actions.
So one last question. If somebody came to the town clerk with a petition, would it be up to the town clerk to say, did you spend money to get these signatures on the petition? How would that person be identified to need education?
And that's, so the stage really wouldn't be on the collecting the petition side, but that certainly would be a great point for the materials that we and the toolkits that we provide to the clerks to be able to have available. So the clerks to say, here comes the petitions. If you're going to be advocating for this and spending money, make sure you know this is how you would register, and give the information, you know, about the law. That's the kind of information that we could provide with the clerks. And also, I think in addition to that, we'd certainly do broader press releases. We would do communication, for example, with last year with the firearm bill that was passed, firearm in the polling places. We made posters that we supplied to town clerks. We also gave sample language for Front Porch Forum that clerks for BCA could post to help get that word out more broadly, so that people weren't surprised. And those would all be parts of the same effort when discussions were coming up, so that people more broadly could be aware that these requirements apply to the individuals, as they do right now. I mean, to be clear, weighing in on public questions, if you're a committee, if you're more than one entity, you are required to file. it's different, as Deputy Secretary Hibbert said, it's inconsistent with the other forms as far as having the names, of the individuals, where the money came from, just saying where it went. So it creates that difference in forms, which is both confusing to people when they use our archives to try to look on the transparency side to see why are these reports, showing all this information, these other reports, don't have it. That's kind of
So
a,
we are seeking to change that, whether it's a political committee or a public question. We want to know where the money is coming from and how it's being spent, and the same rules for everyone.
Thank you.
So I do know we have a guest on remote to speak to a particular portion of the bill. I just want to check in with them to see if they're on a time constraint and maybe get to their feedback for a moment.
Sure.
CJ. You there, sir?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
All right, wonderful. I didn't know what type of timeline you were on, if you wanted to just take an opportunity to speak to the provisions of the bill that you were brought in to offer testimony for. Because I know you are here for one specific area.
I'm here at the pleasure of the committee, so if now is a good time, I'm happy to speak. If now is not a good time, I'm happy to wait.
Is that okay with you folks, or should we just, let's push through with the rest of this.
We don't have much more, but we also would be happy to take a break, whatever you.
Let's not break our stride. I appreciate your patience, Mr. Coles, and we will get back to you in a moment once we finish up with this portion. I just want
Oh, I have a question, I'm sorry. Going back to section 15 or 16, the threshold for any individual candidate. Right now, there's like a $500 threshold, I think. Is that dollar threshold is going to go away? Every candidate is going to need to file
Yes.
campaign finance.
And so what we are asking is that every candidate affirmatively attest that they have come into our system at each filing deadline and attest that they have not spent or raised $500, or that they have, and then file a campaign report.
So the $500 threshold is going to remain,
Yes.
but everybody needs to register. Okay, that was my misunderstanding.
Again, creating this culture of compliance, making sure that everyone is fully aware that of the requirements that they are required to file if they spend over $500. Right now, we are hearing reports of people not filing and spending. We don't necessarily think there's always malintent there, but people just may not be aware of the requirements. So the way that this would work is we would receive a petition through the town clerks of a candidate, and we would help them get registered as soon as we have their petition. And then they would know, and they would be receiving reminders from us that deadline is coming up and that they need to come in and either file a campaign finance report or attest that they have not raised or spent $500.
Okay, so that's gonna be a change too, that people will get reminders?
People will get reminders with our new system.
Wow.
Yeah,
yeah, we think this
Awesome.
this
turns out
change.
technology
yeah.
can improve lives.
This change in conjunction this change in conjunction with the new campaign finance system, we think will make it much more user friendly. Because again, as Deputy Secretary Hibbert said, we know it's not intent there. We know people are busy, have other jobs, the deadlines come up. It's right in the middle of the campaign. We don't have the ability to give reminders if people haven't registered and don't have their information with us, but being registered and in conjunction with the new system, we'll be able to make it better.
And you'll see a theme. We want people's email addresses so that we can get them into campaign finance, so that we can contact people easier. We want to have more connection points with candidates.
Cool.
Move to section 20, this is on the audit of voter checklists. We did file a separate testimony and testified on this topic a couple of weeks ago. Just wanted to note at that time, we did propose amending the language slightly based on two issues that we raised. In general, we do support the audit and the report. We're happy to have it come from the Secretary of State's office on the checklist and the boundaries. But as we pointed out in that file testimony, that number one, the voter checklist and district boundaries are the responsibility of town clerks and boards of civil authority. And so having that primary audit responsibility, as is currently the practice for those boards of civil authority to review checklists, is the appropriate place. We're happy to collect and collate those results. We're happy to put the specific questions out to clerks, get the responses back, aggregate those results, prepare the report, and submit it to the legislature, number one. Number two, the way the section is currently drafted requires an audit of all voter checklists. The Secretary of State's office doesn't think that full review of all 247 cities and towns is necessary, specifically for the issue that arose and is checking. We really think that it's appropriate to do an audit just of those multi-district towns, just a couple dozen towns that have multiple representative districts and or multiple Senate districts. And so that's the language that we proposed to have collect that audit information. We made that change there. And again, because the vast majority of towns, the over 200 towns that only have only have one representative district in that whole town, their voters can't be in the wrong representative district if they're in that town, they're in that one district. We thought they could be spared.
Basically saving some work for town clerks. Sections 21 and 22 are related to voter fraud. We think that the law can be tightened up for someone who votes in more than once in the same election. To be clear, this is not a rampant problem in Vermont. We had a handful of allegations of voter fraud that we have helped collect data on and referred to the Attorney General's office. When I say handful, we're under 10 out of everybody who voted in both our August primary and our November general election, which is relatively outstanding. But other states are more clear that, for instance, that you cannot vote in the same election more than once. Their language is clearer. We would like that to be true here in Vermont as well. And so Section 21 does this, makes it much more clear, and Section 22 is mimicking that language.
Okay. And Section 23 relates back to the campaign finance and public question campaigns. We support the alignment of those definitions, as Deputy Secretary Hibbert spoke to before. And we think that language clears things up and makes it consistent on that front. Same.
Representative Waters.
Thank you. Before we get too far ahead, and forgive me if we had already discussed or decided this, but when you say we're just gonna do all the multi-district towns for that audit, sorry, I was just stepping back from the thing, I just thought of it. Would you be identifying that, or which districts those are? Is that easy for you to figure out? Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, we did. It's on I looked on the legislative website, which lays out all the districts and the definitions of them, and I wrote down those.
Okay, so it's clear. All right, thank you.
Section 24, the review period to examine petitions is currently at 72 hours. So if the deadline is on a Friday or even a Thursday, the deadline is very short. So we are asking that be changed from 72 hours to 2 business days, because frequently this happens a lot. That deadline is right before Bennington Battle Day, or another long weekend, or the weekend in general, and town clerks and the Secretary of State's office are needing to work on Saturdays to review these petitions. We think if it was 2 business days, regardless of when the deadline falls, whether it falls on a Thursday or a Friday, this would give everybody time to review those petitions.
Section 25, the contact information for the certificate of organization for state committees of parties. Again, we support this with the minor change just in the age of electronic communication. We'd suggest modifying be names and addresses, to say names and contact information in a format specified by the Secretary of State, consistent with what we said before about allowing that people would give the email address or phone number. We've also many people for not give the physical address and with the mail, everything else, having that format.
Section 26, moving on, is nomination of JPs. Right now, the nomination of JP deadline is right after the August primary. This is really a crunch because there's a lot of workload around the August primary, and there's a significant crunch because we need to prepare the ballots for November. It's a very tight timeframe. So it's difficult for the clerks, and it's also difficult for the Secretary of State's office. If this deadline could move up to the third Monday in July, that would help with the clerks, and it would help with our office, because where it is now, where it sits now, we have about 10 days after the primary to get the November ballot ready. And that's just extremely tight for the printer. And so if we are able to move it up, we'll be able to be in more communication with the clerks on those nominations, make sure that we have everybody's name spelled correctly, and get those ready for the November ballot.
Section 27, quick with this one, we support a change as written. It aligns with how audits have been conducted after general elections. Our office will produce a policy detailing how random selection is used to ensure all jurisdictions have the risk of audit, and also ensuring that diversity of size and geographic distribution when we perform those audits in the December after general elections.
Section 28, opening ballots. We really see this as a cleanup. We think that, not having been in these seats at the time, we think that this might have been an oversight. Clerks can open ballots 30 days before the election to start the processing, not counting the ballots, but opening them. And now that ballots are being sent 45 days before the election with UOCAVA and with universal vote by mail, there's been a lot of confusion about what clerks should do with ballots between day 45 and 31 before an election. This would allow clerks to do the processes that they do starting currently 30 days before the election, opening ballots and securing them in their vault. Sure. Section 29 is open meeting law and annual meeting. This expressly exempts annual meeting law from the annual meeting, town meeting. We support this change. It is how the Secretary of State and the LCT have traditionally interpreted annual meeting. This just makes it clear, which is lovely. And so it just makes it really clear what's happening at town meeting, whether it's done by Australian ballot or traditional floor vote.
Sections 30 through 36 pertain to local government. Secretary of State's office refer to any of those as policy decisions, and certainly any feedback that the clerks offer on that side. The one piece we did want to flag was we're curious about the rationale for the changes in 17 VSA 2681A, which seems to shorten by a week the window that clerks have to receive petitions for municipal officers. We know they're already under tight timelines to prepare ballots, and for those towns that do send out absentee and mail ballots are under a crunch, as we suggested with the proposal on moving the justice of the peace back in the summer to allow more time for making sure there aren't errors in preparing ballots. That particular item seemed to be going in the other direction. So that was one that we were just wanted to inquire about or flag to make sure that those and any downstream impacts were considered. Section 37, the effective date sounds great to us. And as I mentioned, the three items that wanted to flag that were in the prior version one. Oh, sorry. Right.
No, I got you.
Right.
Yeah.
That were in version 1.5 that just wanted to flag were three items that we do support the reinstatement of if they were inadvertently taken out. Number one was there were changes to 17 VSA 2703 That's the presidential primary. Realized, the big slew of those changes pertained to ranked choice voting for the presidential primary. But there was an item in there that that would have created a registration process for write-in candidates, much as we were speaking about before for sections 13, 14, and 15. Same process. They have to have the consent of candidate. If they file that consent of candidate, then the word would go out to the clerks. They would count those people who were added. If they weren't, the clerks would proceed with that same process. So really just that consistency across elections was the one item we had. The other item was similar for consistency side, as Deputy Secretary Hibbert spoke about changing that review period from 72 hours to 2 business days in that same section in 17 VSA 2704, same process for presidential primary review. So when the materials come in, the petitions come in, there would be that 2-day window. Again, consistency, changing the 72 hours to the 2 days. That was in version 1.5 as well. We just wanted that to be reinstated for consistency if we could. And then the third item was there was previously a section in section 11 of version 1.5 that related to expanding the electronic ballot delivery. This is the item I spoke to before. So again, because I think that section 11 spoke to both the electronic ballot return and the electronic ballot delivery, I think when the change was made to make electronic ballot return be a report, I think the electronic ballot delivery fell out of this new version. So that was one that is really, there were two small changes in there. Number one, in that section, we supported clarifying who is an overseas voter. We suggested the language that overseas voter is used in this section means a person who is last domiciled in Vermont before leaving the United States and resides outside the United States. The reason we chose this language is it matches how federal law uses that language. So whenever there can be alignment between state and federal law, we see that as a good thing. The second item, as we referenced, was that we wanted to expand the delivery of electronic ballots to participants in the address confidentiality program. So that's people in the Safe at Home, the mail right now, register with the Secretary of State, mail goes to a PO box. Secretary of State has their address. We're only talking right now 200 Vermonters currently, so it's not a big expansion in terms of number of people, but those are people very similar to the way that military and overseas voters have that extra time for their ballots to come in the mail. Having that delivered by electronic ballot would make it more feasible for them to get their ballot returned by election day.
That's my thought.
Yeah, I was like. All good.
At least it's not ringing.
Yeah, we'll take that as a soft 100.
So that was the extent of our.
Awesome. No, thank you for that thorough feedback and analysis of the bill. That was really valuable for the work we're gonna do. So mindful of the break we have scheduled, I do want to speak to the gentleman online since he's been so patient. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hear from him. We're gonna take a break, and then the rest of the session is gonna be all about receiving the feedback from the clerks who have been so patient with us. So thank you. How are you, sir?
He didn't hear you.
How are you,
Sorry,
sir?
I'm well. I had to find the unmute button in this. So I'm well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful.
Shall I proceed?
Please, yeah, the table is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair Byrong and committee members for this opportunity to address the committee today. For the record, my name is CJ Coles. I represent the nonpartisan nonprofit organization Verified Voting. And our mission is to strengthen democracy for all voters by promoting the responsible use of technology in elections. Since our founding in 2004 by a group of computer scientists, these have been our guiding principles. Originally, and with my submitted written testimony, I was here today to speak in opposition to the electronic ballot return provisions within this elections bill. However, I do understand that now those provisions have been turned into a report and a study and will not be enacted currently in its current form. So I do appreciate that. And so I will change my testimony slightly just to provide this committee with some information on studies that have been conducted around this policy area. This has been a policy issue that has been studied almost since the advent of the internet, or when the internet became widely used, sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s, and has been studied since then. But I'll point to some recent studies. So in 2018, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine stated that at the present time, the internet or any network connected to the internet should not be used for the return of marked ballots. Further, internet voting should not be used in the future until and unless very robust guarantees of security and verifiability are developed and in place. And I believe the Secretary of State's office actually mentioned some similar things, that they would like to study this issue because there are outstanding questions about the security of such systems. In 2022, at the direction of President Biden, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is the federal agency responsible for issuing cybersecurity standards, conducted research on ways to enhance accessibility for voters, particularly with disabilities. That 2022 report, NIST, did not recommend electronic ballot return, instead concluding that there remains significant security, privacy, and ballot secrecy challenges. Also in 2022, a blue ribbon panel was convened by the University of California, Berkeley's Center for Security in Politics, and they concluded that creating even standards for electronic ballot return to be done securely and privately was not feasible. In fact, they said, when internet ballot return is employed, it may be possible for a single attacker to alter thousands or even millions of votes. And this lone individual could perpetrate an attack from a different continent from the one where the election is being held, or actually could be on the continent where the election is being held, and perhaps they could do that under the protection of a rogue nation. I will also note that in September of just this past year, President Biden extended the national emergency with respect to foreign interference in or undermining public confidence in the United States elections. He said, quote, "Foreign powers have stored."
Well, you might want to turn your video off. You're starting to vibrate.
To exploit America's free and open. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
There we
Yes.
go. Let's roll with that. Yeah.
Back up 2 minutes.
Back up.
Okay. Back up.
Yeah, bring it back 30 seconds.
Well, okay. Very good. I apologize. The internet unstable. What I was just saying is that in September of this past year, President Biden continued for an additional year the national emergency with respect to foreign interference in or undermining public confidence in election systems. He specifically quotes the proliferation of digital services in the election space. And he says, quote, "Through the unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure or the covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation, this continues to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States." And I will wrap by noting, and this was included in my written testimony, that in 2020 and in 2024, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and the United States Election Assistance Commission issued a risk assessment on the risks associated with electronic ballot return And they concluded both in 2020 and 2024 that electronic ballot return remains high risk and is something that really should not be explored unless it really is absolutely necessary. And so with that, given that this appears to be report language in the bill, this is a policy that continues to be studied and then looked at. And right now, the security isn't there. The internet is not secure enough to return a marked ballot. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that feedback, sir. Do we have any questions or feedback, Mr. Quinn? All right. Well, thank you for your patience and your time, sir. We did want to hear from some organizations such as yours, so I appreciate you finding the time for us. With that committee, we're going to break for, we said 15, I'm going to call it 20 right now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear from this very, very, very patient councilman clerks and treasurers associations. With